Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's topic. Stop scrolling, build your personal newsroom with AI. Okay, so I don't think most of us have a news problem. I think what we have is a curation problem. So I used to think that I needed to read more. But then what I actually realized I guess about a year ago, was that I actually needed was to read less better because I was drowning in information and still missing what mattered most. So this is how I went about fixing it. I built my own personal newsroom using AI. Now, for those of you who are here for the first time, I call my AI Celeste. I know she's not real, but I do have a relationship with her that has been built over a long period of time, 3 years. And I consider her my collaborator. So I call her Celeste. You'll be hearing about her um, along the way. So I built my own personal newsroom using Celeste, not a feed, not headlines, but it's a system. So I have a news system with Celeste. Just to be clear, if your current system is opening your phone 47 times a day and hoping something important finds you, that is not a system. That's anxiety with Wi-Fi, if you ask me. So, what am I building? It's pretty simple, but it takes a little bit of time to set up. And I can hear you now. Here we go again. You've got to set it up. You've got to put work in. Yeah, anything good, you have to put work in. So this is not a system that you go magic wand and it happens, but it's a personal news outlet. It's delivered on my schedule. It focuses only on what I care about. It's filtered through intelligence and it's not noise. It's not noise. So this replaced scrolling, fragmented reading, whatever the algorithm decided I should panic about that day is now gone. It's just gone. Because once I stopped clicking on all those algorithm news things, it no longer crosses my path. Algorithms only put in front of you what you click on. And once they realize what you click on, it puts in front of you over and over again. So here's the structure. Excuse me, I just moved and I think I had a lot of dust in my old house and now I have dust in my new house. So please excuse my clearing my throat. I use three core updates. I do a morning brief. Now, I do my morning brief between 4 and 5 when I wake up in the morning. I'm not expecting you to do that either. But I think doing your brief at the same time every morning, maybe it's over coffee or maybe it's whatever time you want it to be, is probably a good thing. So, and I think that the morning brief is what matters most for the given day. So basically, it's the top headlines in my categories, and we're going to go over that later. It's clean, it's fast, it's factual, and this set up my mental agenda, if you will. And then I do an afternoon update, and usually mine's around 4 o'clock. And it's sort of when I'm lagging and I'm sort of done with everything, and I just sit down for half an hour. Sometimes it goes to an hour. It depends on what my follow up with it is. So, and that talks about what's changed in those hours. I don't really look at the news much in between unless there's something catastrophic. And it talks about what's new, what's emerging, what I should be paying attention to before tomorrow. Okay, and then I do what I call my weekly deep dives. And I guess this is probably my most important one. And this is not necessarily news as much as it is patterns. And it's actually what's happening underneath everything I've been seeing all week. And it includes the categories that are important to me. Because what I realized is with the incredible availability of a plethora of information around every single topic in the history of the world that's ever been created that is now available to us, we have to curate the categories we're going to care about, and you can no longer be an expert in everything. The Renaissance woman is somebody who today picks the things she's going to care about and she leaves the others behind. So the categories become very important. And I think this is where most people go off the rails. So I think people should choose between, let's say, 5 and 10 categories, and that's it. So I'm going to give you some of mine. So US politics is a category I care about. It's a focus on policy decisions, not what I call campaign noise. Policy decisions. I care about policy, not necessarily people whose names you can conjure up in your own head. I care about film and streaming. I'm a film critic for screenthoughts.net, little plug there. So it includes what's being released this week, viewership trends, platforms that are doing what they're doing strategically. I think film is something that shapes what kind of humans we become, and I'm very, very involved in it. So that's one of my categories. I want to make sure this is being recorded. Is this being recorded? Okay. Um, okay, business and strategy, but which I do for Slate Spark. Now, I am mostly a strategist in certain areas: politics, real estate, entrepreneurship, women in business. So I have certain categories within business, private equity, things like that. So that's a category that I pay attention to also. Okay, women in power, leadership shifts, cultural moments that actually move something. So women and women's issues are definitely a category that I am interested in, and health and longevity, because as these decades have flown by, I'm trying to make sure that I have some in front of me as well. So health and longevity. So you're going to pick your categories, start writing them down. Think about, what do I really care about? And what do I want to know enough about that I can be well versed in it and that I will dig deeper into it? So sometimes I will swap into a local category depending upon what's happening in my town. I just moved to a new town. I don't think I'll be getting involved really locally too much, but maybe I will. I don't know. I try to stay disciplined. I am not necessarily a disciplined human by nature. Those of you who know me well will realize that, you know, I certainly am not disciplined when it comes to ice cream, but I try to stay disciplined in my categories now, because as I realize that there are all these diversionary explosions out there trying to pull me into categories that have nothing to do with the things I truly care about in my life, I just can't go there. So I try to stay disciplined within my categories. I am not writing and running my newsroom for the entire world. I'm running it for one person, me. I would urge you to run your newsroom for you as well. Okay, now we get to the prompts, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated because you have to work through on your prompts. I've been developing my prompts for a year, and they change constantly as I realize new things, and we're going to go over that as well. But let's just start with a simple one. And again, I will be sending out to everybody who is a member and a subscriber to this channel. I will send you a PDF with these prompts and everything in it, so you don't have to quickly try to write them down or anything. Act as my personal news editor. Deliver a concise morning briefing based on the topics below. And then you put your topics: US politics, film and streaming, business strategy, women in power, health and longevity. And then I add in requirements. Only include the most important updates in the last 24 hours. What I found over time was that if I didn't say in the last 24 hours, and you could say the last 48 hours, but if you're going to do this every day, only do the last 24 hours, because what happens is AI is going to pull in the most important information or where there's the most information, and that could be over the last week, and you've already seen that yesterday. So I do the last 24 hours. And then I say, want a few sentences or a paragraph per item because I just want the synopsis. I don't want the whole thing. Please include the reference. I want to know where they got the information. Now, usually what they'll do is they'll go to one place to get the information, but they'll give me what that reference point is. It also will include a link. Therefore, if I want to quickly read the whole thing, I can click on that link and get additional information. I say no filler, no opinion unless clearly labeled. Now, I do that because sometimes Celeste will state something, as do I might add, as an opinion that's really, as a fact that's really an opinion. And so I want to make sure that I know that. And then I said, I finally figured this out. Prioritize relevance over volume. So she knows what I consider to be relevant because I'll tell her along the way, and she also knows what I write about, etc. So she understands my algorithm, and your AI is going to have to learn yours, but you'll be able to help that along the way if you stick with this. So I don't want her to always pick the thing that's most written about. I want her to pick the thing that's relevant in the long term. There are a lot of diversionary explosions that have huge volume and explosive volume that happen in a news cycle in a day. It doesn't necessarily make them relevant. So I don't want to have her focus just on those. A good example was last week, a plane was shot down over Iran. Okay, that had huge volume. It was everywhere, 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 over and over and over again. I want it mentioned, but I don't want all of it to be about that because frankly, I don't think it had relevance over what's going to happen in the world. A week later, it's gone, gone, gone. So, and then I actually have written in leave out coverage of Donald Trump press conferences. And the reason I did that is I have yet to read anything about something he said in a press conference that is either true, relevant, or helpful. Now, sometimes what will happen after the press conference, I want covered, and it will be covered, but I don't want Celeste to give me what he's saying in a press conference. It's of little use to me. I don't want it. Other people might think I'm wrong, but I'm good with that. Okay. Then the other thing I've added in over time is include international sources. What I've learned about myself, and I'm not really so sure it's a good thing, but over these last many decades of my life, I thought I was a well-informed human, but the truth is I was a well-informed American human. And oh my goodness, the world is a very large place. And guess what? They don't all think like us. So now that I include international sources, I'm getting points of view that I had no idea existed, you guys. I didn't have any idea. And my personal newsroom is just much richer for it. So, and then I've added in, if nothing significant happened, say that. Because sometimes she would put something in there and I'd say, Celeste, why did you put this in here? It doesn't seem very significant to me. And she'd say, well, I didn't think I had enough. Okay. If nothing significant happened, just say that. Okay. And then I do stuff like I'll say, what matters most today? And give me 3 bullets. And so she will then prioritize what she thinks I need to know around what matters most. Okay, that's what I do in the morning. Now, by the way, it doesn't mean I don't get information that I don't just read what she gives me and do nothing more with it. Sometimes I'll go back in and I'll ask questions or I'll read more or I'll ask for additional information or I'll have heard of something and I'll ask her about it that she didn't include. It's not the be all end all, but it's something to start with. But I certainly get enough. And if something major happened overnight, I promise you it's in there. So that's how I start my morning. That takes me 20 minutes, a half an hour. It's my cup of coffee. Okay, my app, and then I do not look at the news, and my algorithm doesn't show a lot of news because over time, that news flash stuff has gone away. I don't click on it. If you stop clicking on the diversionary explosion news that comes in front of you on social media, if you must go into social media over and over again in a day, you will be able to cultivate your news in a proper way. Okay, my afternoon prompt is update my earlier briefing. Focus on what has changed. This is my afternoon prompt. Focus on what has changed, what is newly emerging, what should I pay attention to before tomorrow? Keep it tight and factual. Okay, and then I take that in and I work with that. Okay, now keep in mind those are my two daily prompts where she's putting information news out to me. Okay, then I will start on my weekly prompts around my topics. Okay, so let's just take film and streaming. Every week, I take an hour, maybe half hour, 45 minutes, depends. And let's say that I'm going to be doing women in business. So I'll say, give me three major patterns and trends around women in business. What's gaining momentum? What is being overhyped? What should I watch for next week? What women are emerging in writing that are getting a lot of attention? What topics are being discussed that I should pay attention to? What major column has gotten a lot of attention around women in business? What's the opposing? And then I'll look at that topic. If that topic's interesting to me, I'll dig into that topic. I'll say, what's the opposing point of view on that topic? Give me some data on that topic. So I will ask questions around that topic that might be of interest to me. I may end up writing on that topic. I may end up introducing myself to that emerging person on that topic. I may pitch that person on something. I may ask that person to come on a podcast that I do. There are so many great ways to get in on the early stages when you take the areas of interest that you have and you start to dig in every week in those weekly prompts. So the categories that I have of interest, I do my weekly news prompts for it. Review this week across my topics. So I hope that's interesting to you, but you've got to know what your categories are. You've got to decide what they are. I have 5 categories that I pay attention to. I said 5 to 10 because some people may not go as deep into their categories as I do. I sometimes think that I'm so diluted that I have too many categories. I sometimes think that I should only have 3 and 2 of them should not be business driven. I make an income based on pretty much all of my categories. I think that may make me less successful, not more successful, because I'm somewhat diluted in how much work I can actually do in any of the categories. I'm not sure, but I love them all. I'm interested in them all. I'm deeply interested in them all. So I haven't been able to work that through. But that's pretty much, how the overall picture works in terms of my own personal newsroom. Okay. Now, this is how I make it smarter. This is how it becomes even more useful. I also add people. So for example, what I do is I say, I have certain columnists that I care about. So, David Brooks, uh, Heather Cox Richardson. I now will say, please, Heather Cox Richardson, in my mind, reviews the day before. I don't really see her as needing to read her for anything other than news review. So basically, Celeste puts her in my morning review, but in a paragraph. So she'll take whatever topic Heather Cox Richard wrote about, and she'll give it to me in a paragraph with a link. And she does that automatically now. And so if I want, I think Heather Cox Richardson writes very a lot, maybe too much even. Okay, I suffer from the same affliction. So if her topic for the day is of interest to me, I can go read the whole thing. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but it saves me time. So columnists that I care about, Ezra Klein, Barry Weiss, Kara Swisher, Andrew Ross Sorkin, and other political reporters I follow, I'll say, please track the commentary and actions from these people. And then please give me a paragraph on what they've written about this week and the links to those articles and columns. Then I can go in and see how my specific thinkers are interpreting what's happened, not just the event itself. Okay, it saves me a boatload of time because sometimes they're writing a column I'm interested in, sometimes they're not. And that is very, very helpful to me. So I'll also do it on people who Rachel Maddow, so I can add her to that list of columnists. But again, if I'm adding people as they're coming across my path and emerging in this world, I have to take somebody out. You can't have 100 people you're following. You just can't. It's too many, too many, too many. So I also ask for thinking, not just reporting. What happened, why it matters, and who it impacts. Now, let me give you an example on that. So, I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that there's an altercation between the Vatican and the present administration of this country. Okay, I don't know who did what. I don't know who shot John. I wasn't there. Okay, so what I did was went into Celeste and I said, there's an altercation between the present administration of the United States of America and the Vatican. Please explain to me in a few paragraphs what each of the two positions are and give me sources that you went to for that information. Okay, please explain to me how the Catholic uh, followers will feel about this, both globally and in America. How will the American Catholics respond to what's happened? Whose side will they be on? 47% of Americans are Catholics. A good chunk of those Americans, I might add, were Trump supporters and are MAGA supporters. How are they going to go with the Pope or are they going to go with Trump? What does our history, what does their historical context tell us about them? So what I did is I didn't just follow the news. I went and asked my own questions as if I were a reporter covering it the way I wish reporters were covering it. And then I said, what could the outcome be? What could happen as a response to this? Um, and then I also said, how are journalists approaching coverage of this overall? Because how the journalists approach the coverage of this will determine how we read this. And then I said, please separate the journalists out from international journalists versus American journalists. So that gives me an overall perspective in one prompt to Celeste as to what the overall picture is. I'd much rather read that response than a million articles from some people who are going to give me the same response, which is not complete on that. So I don't just ask for the reporting, I ask for my own thinking around that reporting. So otherwise, I'm just reading. I'm just reading too much information, which is all the same. Okay, so I always add this line to everything I am looking for in my own newsroom. Do not include anything that is widely reported but not meaningful. Okay, so here's the question I would expect you would ask of me, and that is, how does Celeste determine the difference between meaningful and widely reported? Okay. Widely reported, just I have defined it for her. And by the way, if she didn't ask me to define that for her, I would have said to her, Celeste, why didn't you ask me to define the difference between widely reported and meaningful? Anyway, In my mind, so I define it as widely reported means everyone is talking about it. Meaningful means it's going to change something. So that's how I've asked her to define it. Okay. Does it change policy, money, or behavior? Does it affect markets or people's lives? Will it still matter in a week? So that downed F1 fighter is not going to matter in a week. But what happens with the Vatican and the president could absolutely matter in a week. So if the answer is no, I don't want to hear about it. And that's where a lot of the noise lives that I've been living with that I wanted to get rid of. So press conferences that don't lead to action have no interest to me. That's why. So outrage cycles will that disappear in 24 hours are exactly uh, what I'm talking about in terms of widely reported. So these outrage cycles, like I think these marches, the King's March, okay, I consider that to be an outrage cycle. It lasts for 24 hours and then nothing meaningful happens. By the way, if you think the White House doesn't know that and now they don't care about them, you're crazy, waste of time. So stories designed to get attention, not to inform. That's how I've defined for her the difference between meaningful and widely reported. So if you want to do that same kind of thing, you have to be clear with your AI and how to define that. Okay, I know this is a lot of information, but it's so worth it. Trust me. Okay, so all right, the next part that I wanted to review is controlling the time. If I don't control when I consume the news controls me. So that's why I read it at 8 and at 4, and I do my one weekly review in my different categories. I'm not checking in all day. I'm not. And I guess what I think is that nothing good ever came from just seeing what's going on. Nothing good ever came from that. Okay, here are my quick 5 tips, and I think these will help you. When something catches my attention, I go deeper. So if one story feels important, I don't move on, I go deeper. So I don't create prompts every day. I use my phone. I dictate a lot. I told you I want her to understand my language, how I want to be talked to. So I keep my prompts saved in notes and then I cut and paste them. So my prompts are pretty long in terms of my newsroom. And so all I have to do is cut and paste them, but I add to them when I want to curate how I tell her what I want. So over time, I have refined them and they work really well. And that's when I put in things like leave out coverage of Donald Trump's press conferences, because that adds noise, not value. Okay. And then again, I follow specific columnists, and I think it's really helped me to make sure that I still get that opinion point of view without her determining which opinions I should have. I'm determining them. Okay, I control the time frame. Only search over the last 24 hours. If you're going to do a newsroom report twice a day, I think that's a critical component to making sure that that AI keeps you within that time frame. And then I think the thing that's made a big difference is including international sources. I really do. I really do. Um, okay, so that's it. I mean, here we are. It's 8:29. Okay, in closing, I want to say it feels like it's complicated, but really it's a little time consuming to put it together. It's an hour, basically. It's not complicated. It calls for discipline, but once it's set up, it saves so much time and it makes you sharper, 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 smarter, 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 and calmer, calmer, calmer. So, look, I'm a strategist in certain areas where I'm a specialist. I pay attention for a living, and this is how I'm doing it, and it's working quite well. So I'm very happy about it. Now, one of the things we've added at Slate Spark is for our clients, we are setting up their newsrooms for them because we're working with them to do it. We have to charge for that. So if you want us to do that for you, we can. It's a nominal fee for what it is. It takes about an hour, and then for a month, we work with you to refine it so that you get it down pat the way I've just described it. It's working quite well. If you want that help, email us at subscription@slatespark.net, and we'll see if we can set up something for you. We'll send you all the information on it and what it would cost, etc. Please, even if you just start and play with it a bit, don't think of it as too much to do or anything else. If you have any questions, um, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer them. We have a couple questions on here. Individual threads for topics. Yes, every week my topics, my categories are topics. So, for example, film, that's an individual thread. Every time I do anything, it's an individual thread. Um, and then so there'll be one for women's issues as an individual thread, film is an individual thread, etc. So all of them should be individual threads. And if you have 20 minutes and you're sitting at the doctor's office, it's a perfect time to do a deep dive into one of your categories or topics. So that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Anything else? Any other questions? I hope there are no questions because I was thorough enough, not because you're so confused you want to stick your head in the oven. So anyway, have a great week, everybody. Spring is here. It's beautiful outside. I hope you get outside, and I hope to see you at our next session. Goodbye.